Good morning. This session is titled Studying in the Health Sciences. My name is Gina Briscoe. I'm a nursing instructor here at Calhoun College. Much of what I'm going to cover today is applicable to all students in the health sciences. Our objectives today, the things we want to answer: what factors impact learning and success? What are some creative strategies students can utilize for learning? Hopefully, after listening to this session, you will have a good understanding of some creative ways you can begin studying. That will be our focus. Let's talk just first about learning. Studies show that students do not learn much just by sitting in the class listening or passively absorbing information. They don't learn a whole lot by strict memorization either, or just answering knowledge questions. Students must talk about what they are learning, write about what they're learning, and relate it to their daily lives. They must make what they learn a part of themselves. They must let the learning experiences shape who they are. So, what we're going to be talking about is more active learning, becoming involved with the material you're trying to learn. Recently, I watched a special on ESPN, and it was about Alabama football, and it showed the Alabama football team preparing for their national championship that they won last year. And I heard the players and coaches saying something over and over again, and I thought it was really simple and could apply anywhere. What they said was, either we are getting better or getting worse every day, and there's no in between. I think this concept is really applicable to nursing. Either you're learning something or you're not every day. So you've got to actively seek information, seek to learn, and grow. Or you're digressing. You're not getting anything out of the learning experience. Sometimes it is a bit uncomfortable to be an active learner. You may be asked to participate in activities that are really out of your comfort zone. But that allows us to grow beyond measure, really. I can recall, when I first came here to Calhoun and being asked to do some things that were a bit uncomfortable as an instructor, and how much I learned from those activities. And you'll find also that as you do step out of your comfort zone, you will become more comfortable doing those things. And that's pretty much how becoming a health science student, you're going to be uncomfortable initially in your learning. But as you do things over and over again, you get more comfortable with them. This is Edgar Dale's cone of learning. Studies show that adults understand and retain new information more effectively if they use what we call a multi-sensory approach to learning. One that combines words, pictures, seeing with hearing, writing with reciting. So you can see the triangle shows that 90% of what we both say and do is what we're going to remember. And you can see as you move down the triangle, you have more active or doing learning. So I would encourage you to use this model and approach, using a multi-sensory approach as you're studying the material you're trying to learn. There are three primary domains of learning. There's the cognitive domain, which includes understanding, and it includes all intellectual behavior. There's the affective learning that deals with expression of feelings, acceptance of attitudes, opinions, and values. And then there's the psychomotor learning, which involves acquiring skills that require you to integrate mental and muscular activity. So I would venture to say that any health science student has to learn in all three ways to be successful. I want to start first with our first objective, what factors impact learning. I want to answer that objective first. There are several different categories of factors which impact learning and success in the health sciences. The first major category I would like to talk about is personal factors. Personal factors are the items that are listed below. Looking at your prior study habits, examining, how have you studied in the past? How have you learned material in the past? For instance, in high school, did you study on a daily basis, or did you cram the night before? Did you make A's? Did you make B's? Did you make C's? Did it come easy for you, or did you have to put a lot of time and effort into studying? A lot of students come here thinking, that they can continue to study like they did in high school and be successful. And quite rapidly they see that the old study habits may not work for them. So, looking at what study habits you've had in the past, what were successful for you and what were not, and maybe stepping it up is required. Also looking at your learning style. There are a number of learning style quizzes online, and I'm going to be pointing you to some of those in a little bit. But, does the teacher teach to your learning style? Or do you have to supplement your learning apart from the teacher? Because every teacher teaches to different learning styles, and we do try to meet all the different learning styles, but we are stronger in some areas than others. And so sometimes you'll have an instructor that maybe you have a little bit more problems learning from, or maybe you don't know your learning style and you don't know what really works. There are three primary learning styles, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. But learning styles, that factor does impact your learning and your success. Personality also impacts your learning and success. Are you a procrastinator, or are you a type A person that has to know every little detail? That impacts, your learning. Your level of responsibility. Do you take responsibility for your learning, or do you depend on the instructor to provide every bit of information to you? In college, you will find that you are responsible for your learning. The teacher is a facilitator, a guide, but you are responsible for your learning. And so it's a bit different from elementary and high school. Can you manage distractions? Because everybody has distractions in their life. In the classroom, you've got to manage your stressors and be able to focus on the material. I skipped over foundations. Do you have a firm foundation? Did you do well in high school? Did you do well in anatomy and physiology? Because anatomy and physiology is a foundation for the health sciences for many of the courses. So do you have a firm foundation? Because if you don't, then you may have to go back to some of those foundational courses and re-study or relearn the material, because in the Health Science Division we're building on some of those foundational classes. Are you motivated? Are you motivated? Is what you're going into your passion? Are you excited about it? Do you get up and think, what am I going to learn today? So that will impact your learning. Have you learned from the mistakes you've made? Have you learned that you can't wait till the day before to study for an exam that covers 30 hours of material? It's virtually impossible to learn that material at the last minute. You have to be organized. And so have you learned from those mistakes? Have you done a procedure and done it incorrectly and realized maybe you didn't spend the time you needed practicing the procedure? Do you have an attitude of humility and seeking to learn? That's very, very important. Do you have health? Because if you're not healthy, a lot of times you can't focus on the material you're trying to learn. You're not at your best. So health is important and does impact success. And do you have the resources? Do you have a computer that works? Because that is very, very important in most of our programs. Do you have the want to and passion? I guess is another personal factor. Are you, again, motivated? The next set of factors that impact success in learning for our programs include organizational skills. Can you manage your time, materials, and personal life? Do you manage a planner? Do you study every day? Do you set aside time for doing your studying when you're at your best, at your mentally best? Do you have your materials organized? Do you have your notes where you can quickly find them under each unit of study or module? Do you conscientiously keep your materials organized so you can quickly refer to them when you're studying? Do you manage your personal life? Do you manage your time with your family so that you can study? Test-taking skills is another factor. Are you a good test taker? We could teach a whole lesson on test-taking. That's not the point of this lesson, but, can you take tests? Do you know how to take tests? Do you have the skills and know the processes and procedures that lead to good test-taking results? And then test preparation skills. Do you know how to prepare for a test? Do you know how to study? Do you know how to take notes? Can you read the material and learn from your reading? Do you have the advanced thinking capabilities that are necessary? So, all of these factors are important in learning and success in the health sciences. And when you think about all of these factors, they all do go hand in hand oftentimes. If you don't manage your time, if you're not motivated, then you're not going to study. You're not going to prepare for your test. So all of these factors can impact one another. So we've covered some points that are relative to success. Let's talk just a little bit about failure. This is a list of top 10 causes of failure in college. And this is college in general, not health science failure. So some of these things will apply to health sciences, some of them may not, and apply to the students here at Calhoun. If you'll look, number 10, lack of ability or a poor high school prep. So if you've done poorly in high school or in some of your foundational classes, you may not do well in college. Number 9, selection of the wrong college. Well, I think this is more applicable to students that go away to four-year universities and maybe get lost in the system. I don't think this is necessarily applicable to the community college student. Interference from psychological problems. Some students have problems psychologically, mentally, that impair their ability to learn and impair their ability to be successful. But look at number 7, failure to assume responsibility. Students that don't do their assignments, don't take care of business when they're at college. Lack of personal standards of quality. Some students think that they can just get by and halfway do things, and in college it's a little bit different than high school. The quality standards are higher, and much higher for the health science students because we're taking care of people. Poor language skills, poor abilities to listen and understand and comprehend information can lead to failure. This is the student that's not able to read or write or speak or listen effectively. This could also be the student that has English as a second language. You know, that can lead to difficulties for students. So language problems are a big issue. They're not necessarily related to intelligence or skill. Just because the language is not up to par does not mean the person's not able to learn the information or are smart. Inappropriate choice of major. Some students choose majors that really do not fit their abilities, their personality, and they choose majors based on someone else's dream for them. So I would challenge you, is this what you want to do? Because if it's not, you're not going to put as much effort into it. Vagueness of long-range goals. Do you really, is this what you really want to do? Or, do you know where you're going? Do you have a long-range goal in sight? Is this a stepping stone to get to it? If you do and you realize, maybe this is not what I want to do forever, but this is what I'm going to do now because it's going to lead me to something else. You've got a dream. You've got to have a dream and a goal. Other priorities. A lot of times college is considered important to parents and teachers and employers, but students, sometimes it's not as important. Sometimes social activities are more important. So you've got to really understand that, this has to be your number one priority for right now. It may not be your number one priority later. I see sometimes students that have other priorities, not just in social, but they have another priority in that they have a lot of responsibility with caring for their children or their elderly parents or sick parents, and sometimes those other priorities get in the way of success. And so the timing, sometimes the timing has to be just right for success. So sometimes you have to rearrange your priorities for a time period. While you're in school, your school has to be a priority. And I think, number one is probably number one for anybody, understanding the amount of work required and the effort that's required to be successful. A lot of students don't understand, that they have to seek learning themselves apart from the classroom and have to work at it to learn the material. So this was from one of the a study conducted by the University of Alabama Center for Teaching and Learning. This information was brought from. So let's talk just a little bit more about failure, this is a piece of Swiss cheese, and you can see there are several layers in the cheese, and there's holes in the cheese. And so we're going to use this analogy to talk about weaknesses and failures by nursing students. So this is another picture of the Swiss cheese model. Actually, the Swiss cheese model was used by a researcher in looking at accidents and errors, and how there are several layers that protect systems from falling apart. But I've used this analogy to talk about nurses and health science students. So let's look at this right here. We've got the health science student, and this is her and her life. We talked about the foundations and how we have to have firm foundations. Well, in this student, you can see, she barely passed anatomy and physiology, and she's a slow reader. So there are some weaknesses in her foundations. Then we've got her organizational skills. She does not keep a calendar or a to-do list, and she, doesn't keep her notes organized to where she can find them when she goes to lecture. So she's got a weakness here. And then her personal factors, she's never really had to study. She's always been able to pass without studying very much, and she tends to be a procrastinator. She waits until the last minute, and then she feels very overwhelmed and stressed. Then there are her circumstances, and for her, she has a father that's in hospice and dying at the moment. She also has a husband that's verbally abusive, and he feels threatened by her going back to school, so he's really not supporting her in her efforts. He's not helping her take care of the children. And so then the test preparation skills, she is having difficulty moving from knowledge, learning facts, to application, which application is required by all health science students. You have to be able to apply the information to a patient or to a setting. So you can see, some of these factors, when they all line up, are going to lead to her failing her class. And so I just bring this out to show you that usually there are a number of factors that lead to folks not being successful. We have to establish and fill in these weak areas by some other means. We have to work on our reading. We have to go back and study our anatomy and physiology. We may have to ask someone else to help us with our situation at home. We may have to get our mother-in-law to keep our children because our husband won't. So we have to work on all these areas of our life and fill in these weak areas to prevent being unsuccessful. So I hope that was enlightening to you. So, we've talked about all the different factors that can lead to learning and success, and some of the areas that may be weak. Oftentimes we see students that are very good about attending class. They're in class, they are taking notes, and they're listening to their integrity recordings over and over again, but they find that they're still not successful. Well, I will tell you that this model is not the model for success. We've talked about the fact that you've got to use a multi-sensory approach, but you also have to use approaches that fit you, and we're going to talk in depth about some of those now. But realize that just attending class, taking notes, and listening to integrity is not going to be enough for the health science student to be successful. You've got to do some additional work, and so we're going to talk in depth about some of the requirements that it's going to take for you to be successful. We're going to move into our second objective, and we're going to talk about creative strategies you can use for learning, and how you can prepare for your test. The first bullet point I've got listed here is being a self-starter and focusing. You have got to strategically plan for learning. You've got to be a self-starter. You've got to schedule your studying time on a calendar, and make it, a focus for you that you get your study in every day. You've got to establish an environment that's conducive to learning. If you can set up your study area at home or wherever you're studying, very similar to what you're doing in the classroom, you need to have a comfortable environment, not too hot, not too cold. You need to have a quiet environment. Some students try to say that they like to listen to the TV or music while they're studying. Studies show that those two things really are not good. There is one type of music that's acceptable and conducive to learning, but more than likely no one in this area listens to that type of music. So a quiet environment, an environment free from distractions of people, phones, sounds, and an environment where you're sitting up at a desk or a table, not reclining in a bed or on a couch or whatever. So set your environment up. I will give you an example that my child lived in a sorority house a year, and she also lived with some other students, and she found that she could not study in the sorority house or in her apartment later on because of the distractions. So she purposely went to the library where she could not be distracted by the TV or be distracted by people talking. Her study time was in the library. And here in the Health Science Building we have some study rooms on second floor as well. So removing yourself from distractions is important. Utilizing multiple resources, listening to integrity, looking at someone else's notes, looking up information on the library website. Some of the multi-sensory approaches is very, very important. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of those in a few minutes. Reading your assignments, reading the material you're going to be covering in class before you go to class is a good approach, because then when you're in class you can remember what you've read, and then you can ask questions while your teacher is present. Using meaningful approaches based on your learning preferences. We're going to talk a little bit more about those in a few minutes. But utilizing approaches that fit your lifestyle and your life situation. And I'll give you an example of that. Say you live at home and you have small children. Well, a lot of times when you get home, those children demand your attention. So say you come to class and you're in class from 8 to 12. Well, a good approach would be to take you a break and then come back to the health science building and go in one of the study rooms and study with a partner or study alone, but study here at school before you go home. That way you've done your studying, you've looked at your notes from class, and you don't have the distractions of home. And so a lot of times students will lead their family members to believe that they've got class until 3 o'clock just so they can have the child care they need to study before they come home. And there's not anything really wrong with that, I don't think. So let's talk a little bit about the resources that are at hand for you. The first resource that you have is your objective. The objectives in your course syllabus. Those are used directly for test construction. So realize that if you can study and use your objectives to study, you're going to probably touch on the material that's going to be on the test. And so let me show you a quick sheet relative to studying by objectives. Studying using objectives to help you structure and organize your studying. The first thing you want to do is identify your learning objectives for the material. And you'll find these oftentimes in your course syllabus, or your lecturer will have these listed on their PowerPoint slides at the beginning oftentimes. But look at those objectives. List those objectives on a piece of paper for each objective, and then change those objectives into questions. You'll notice that for this material, I went ahead and made my objectives into questions. But oftentimes you won't see the objectives termed into questions. So it is helpful to take the objectives and make questions out of them. And I've gave you 2 examples here of objectives that I've turned into questions, and I turn them into questions starting with what, why, how, when, and who. So you can see how I change the objectives into questions, and then I would suggest that you purposefully search for the answers to these questions, utilizing all your available resources, using your textbooks, looking at your notes from lecture, listening to your integrity recordings, looking at your study guides, and for nurses, looking at those NCLEX review questions, or looking at material in your library, in your Calhoun library. And I'm going to show you how to do that as well with this recording. The next thing on this bullet list is textbooks. Your textbooks are wonderful resources. Oftentimes they have DVDs included that has little questions, little activities. For instance, the Potter and Perry nursing textbook has a wonderful resource for studying fluid and electrolytes. But most of the textbooks nowadays do come with electronic pieces. Your textbooks also usually have the terms listed in the front of the chapters. Looking at those terms, looking those up. Oftentimes they have critical thinking exercises and little tests at the end of the chapters. Utilizing those resources is very important. The next thing on this list is smart thinking and student services. If you think that you have a learning disability, or if you're having trouble with testing and the testing environment, I would encourage you to go see Dr. Carter over in Student Services and talk with him about the problems you're having. He is a wonderful resource in his office. Also, we have available here at Calhoun smart thinking, and I'm going to show you that as well. Okay, I wanted to show you the links and the information about student services. You can go to Student Services and go to More Student Services and then hit Student Affairs. And you can see here's a picture of Dr. Carter and the other two individuals that work in his office and all the services they have available through their office. I also wanted to show you a little bit about the Rhodes program. The Rhodes program is the Retention Office of Academic Development, and it's through Dr. Carter's office. Student success is their #1 priority. A key component of the early warning system is a referral system designated to facilitate ongoing communication between the Rhodes office and college faculty. And so we can refer you to his office if we feel like you have an at-risk situation of not being successful. So as you meet with your advisors, if you're interested in seeing Dr. Carter, they can certainly set you up with an appointment with him. Through the Rhodes program, you can also be involved in the tutorial, getting a tutor to help you. So that is the Smart Thinking program that I was talking about earlier. So you can request and fill out an application here online, fill it out and request the tutor, and then you will be set up to be in the Smart Thinking program, where you can actually access Smart Thinking in Blackboard. So if you're interested and you need assistance, you can get set up with Smart Thinking by filling out this application online and talking to your advisor. Now, Smart Thinking is located in your Blackboard shells. In each course, you'll find a tab showing Smart Thinking. So I wanted to show y'all that as well. See right here it's listed, and you would click on that, and once you're registered, you should be able to log in and go into this Smart Thinking, and anytime you have a question as you're studying at home, you can actually go in and ask an instructor a question relative to the information you're studying, and they will get back with you through your Space account with an answer within 24 hours usually. And it looks like it's not going to load right now, but it usually does load, and that's how you get to it. But those services are available to our students here at Calhoun, and I wanted to make you aware of them. Another resource for students, particularly in the nursing program, I'm not sure about the other health science students, but there is the Evolve case studies and practice test that correlate with the material that you're studying. And then there is the Evolve test taking tutorials, and those are found under if you go into Evolve and then go under case studies, you will then find you'll scroll on down and you'll find the test taking tutorials. And so I'm going to show you where those are now. So you'll log into your Evolve account, and you'll go to Case Studies, and you'll then go ahead and start your course, Evolve Case Studies, and you'll see right here Test Taking Tutorials. Each one of these opens up a tutorial on test taking. These are wonderful resources. And basically it's just a little PowerPoint that you can go through and read, and they're really good resources, so I would encourage you to utilize these. And I've already talked about the DVDs that come with your text books. The Calhoun Library, the nursing reference is particularly helpful to anybody, not just nurses that are in the health sciences. So let me show you. So you will go to Library Services, and if you're on campus, it will just open right up. If not, you'll need to use your student ID and your last name. Go to Online Databases and go to EBSCOhost, and the Nursing Reference Center is just wonderful for all health science students, and you can click on any of these tabs across here and get information. You can search for information about drugs, about diseases. So let's just do a quick search. Let's just do one on thyroid cancer. Okay, see what we get here. So I'm going to hit thyroid cancer, and you can see here it tells me, we have in here tons and tons of information, but these quick lessons are just wonderful, and I believe this is a quick lesson, but let's see right here. Yeah, alright, that was a quick lesson. So you can pull them up and look at them, and they're really a nice resource in that it's just 2 pages long, and it tells you basically most everything you'd want to know about thyroid cancer in a short outline form. But I encourage you to go online and play with the Nursing Reference Center. It has tons and tons of information, skills and procedures. It talks about how to do skills and procedures. Lots and lots of good stuff on here that will help you as you're searching and trying to learn all you can about whatever topic you're studying. Then we have downloading your Tegrity lectures. You can download your Tegrity lectures onto an iPod and listen to them in the car. Listen to them on the way to school if you have a long drive. That's always a good resource. Peers and faculty are also resources. Looking at your neighbor's notes to see if they took something that you didn't is always a good way to study. Also, studying with peers, if that approach works for you, then that's a good way to study. Looking at your notes, discussion boards. A lot of times you will find your instructor have an area where you can discuss things. So discussing things online with your peers is a good technique. Utilizing the health science lab. The health science lab downstairs has videos that you can watch. They have all the necessary equipment to practice your skills. They do have learning modules and case studies down there as well. So utilizing that lab is for you to use. The internet also has a lot of valuable resources, and so I've got a couple of these listed here. So we're just going to take a quick look at some of these websites. This website is called howtostudy.org. It has a lot of information on, reading your textbook, taking tests, practicing for NCLEX if you're a nursing student, study skills. So I would encourage you to look at this website. This Study Stack, it's a really good little website. You've got to realize, though, on any of these internet websites that, accuracy may not be 100%. So if you're really wanting to look for accuracy, you need to look in your textbooks. But you will find on this website lots and lots of flashcards, and anybody can create flashcards on here. So you can create your own flashcards if you want to, but you can also utilize flashcards that other people have created. And I clicked on fluid and electrolytes. What is the normal sodium? You can quiz yourself. Normal sodium is 135 to 145. Am I right? Yes, I am. So normal potassium 3.5 to 5. Oh, I got it right. So you can quiz yourself with some of these websites. medicalmnemonics.com. This is a wonderful site. I really like this. If you're into mnemonics and learning by using mnemonics, this has a vast array of mnemonics to try to help you remember information. So you can see right here, I've just pulled up one, the femoral triangle, arrangement of nerve, artery, and vein. Okay, so that kind of gives you that. But whatever you're studying, there may be a mnemonic that could help you to remember. See, this one is van. But searching on here for the mnemonics and then memorizing those mnemonics, and then when you get ready to take your test, writing your mnemonics down once they've handed out your test booklet, writing your mnemonics on your test booklet, dumping that information so you don't have to remember it. And then when you come to a test question, you can look at your mnemonic and you can remember what you need to answer the question. So those are some internet resources, and I'm sure there's many, many more. But whatever approach you use, you need to, select the approaches that fit you. Some approaches fit certain people better than others. Looking for opportunities in time when you can study. Oftentimes, we spend a lot of time waiting. So if you can have flashcards in your purse or in your car, when you're waiting on your child at soccer practice, that you can go through those flashcards. If you can have your materials, available with you when you've got time, when you've got idle time. Looking at your work duties, do you have time at work to study? I personally had a job where I could study on the job. Some people don't. Do you have peers that live close to you that you can study with? Or you could study even on the telephone with someone if that approach fits your preference for learning. Again, staying after class and avoiding home situations, to study alone or with a peer is a good idea. Learning your learning preference, doing these learning inventories, and I've listed here several learning style inventory websites that you can go to. You just go to these websites and take a little inventory. You answer these questions, and then at the bottom it tells you, it determines your style and then tells you what your style is and gives you some ideas about how to use your learning preference to your advantage to study. So I'd encourage you to go to some of these learning style inventories and take them. Find out all you can about yourself and the best way you can learn, and then put into practice some of these learning styles. So I would encourage you to look at these websites and find out all you can about how you can best learn that fits your style. I've got here a couple of tips based on learning styles I wanted to talk to you about, because I do want to encourage you to use styles, even other styles that do not fit your learning preference, because sometimes you'll find that you can learn in other ways that are not necessarily your preference. Remember, the more senses you use, the more you're going to remember the information. So I've got here listed some tips for the visual learners. Visual learners do well underlining or highlighting or circling the material as they're reading it. You should not circle more than 10% of what you're reading, though, because then it just kind of gets all muddy. So you've got to be able to pick out the key areas when you're doing your underlining and highlighting. Again, looking at someone else's notes and comparing them to your own is a good strategy. You will see things that maybe you didn't see by looking through someone else's notes. Drawing pictures in your notes to illustrate concepts is a good practice. And I'm going to show you some examples of pictures here in just a minute. Using a variety of colors, pens and pencils and markers and highlighters is good. Some students tell me that they use certain color pens in their notes to write notes from class, and then when they're reading the material they use a different colored pen to indicate they got that material from their book, and they put all their notes together by using a variety of pens. Writing the information out is always a good practice for the visual learner. Creating outlines, tables, pictures, graphs, charts, or diagrams is always a good strategy for a visual learner. I personally am a visual learner, so you'll see a lot of that sort of thing in particularly this lecture. So this shows you an example of a book that has pictures to try to help the learner learn the material. And these books are wonderful. They're called Memories, and you can get them at Books A Million if you want to use them. If you're not a drawer but you're a visual learner, this will supplement your learning. Oftentimes I will draw out pictures for myself to try to learn the material. In this particular picture I drew it myself, and it's of the nephron of the kidneys, and I use this to try to learn what happens at each area in the nephron for fluid and electrolyte balance. So this was just a visual for myself that I use also to teach, but I might draw this out and then list under each area what happens, and cover the material up with a little sticky piece of paper and quiz myself with it. Another technique for the visual learner is to create tables and compare and contrast different disease processes or different points in the material that you're studying. This is an example of comparing fluid volume deficit to fluid volume excess in your assessment areas. So, for instance, for fluid volume deficit, I would put, as far as the heart rate goes, that you're going to see an increased heart rate with a deficit. You're going to see a decreased heart rate with an excess. So I would go through and do all my assessment areas and then compare and contrast the two opposite conditions. And then I would have a study tool to memorize the information and visually see it, and then when I was studying I may cover up a section and quiz myself and uncover it and see if I've got it correctly. So that's a good technique as far as visual learners for studying using tables. Concept mapping. Concept mapping is a little more complex. A concept is a term or statement that embodies lesser principles or ideas, kind of like an umbrella for a group of related notions. So you can see on this slide danger. Danger is a concept. Thinking conceptually means that an individual is able to understand more distinct concerns because he or she is first able to grasp the larger idea or the concept. So main concepts are usually supported by sub-concepts. Here the concept is danger and the subconcept is thin ice. The concept of danger can be applied to a number of situations. So we could have lots and lots of subconcepts relative to danger. Concept mapping is using a schematic device to look at concepts and how they relate to one another. This slide shows you, it's very busy when you look at it, but using this technique to study, particularly study with another person, is helpful. Basically, and I'm not going to go through in depth how to do concept mapping because I believe we're going to do another recording specifically on concept mapping. But basically concept mapping, the student would take a blank piece of paper and they would put, whatever they're studying. And for this particular model, infections is what the student was studying. And they then try to think about all the factors that are important in caring for somebody with infections. And so they listed here nutrition. What's important nutritionally for somebody with infections. And so oftentimes people with infections are malnourished because they're tired, or they may have GI distress, or they may have a lack of appetite. So that is a factor for people with infections. How do we prevent infections? And so they listed all the ways you prevent infections and so forth. So you can see it kind of covers a lot of material. And as you're creating these concept maps, it helps to start making connections among different concepts, because that's key in the health sciences, is realizing all these things are not all by themselves, that they do relate to one another. And so creating those connections in your mind is helpful, particularly when you're studying for application type testing. So it's quite in depth, and like I said, if you're interested in learning about concept mapping, look for a recording on concept mapping to come later. We're going to have to teach you how to do that if you're not aware of how to do that. But it really does help in learning the material and being able to apply it. Let's talk about the auditory learner. Auditory learning, it's often helpful for the auditory learner to close their eyes and just listen to the material. Studying in groups is oftentimes a good technique for the auditory learner because there's a lot of talking going on. The auditory learner can tape their notes, take a mini tape recorder and tape their notes and then listen to their notes over and over again. I tried this technique in college and it did help me, and I'm not an auditory learner, but it did help me to hear the material over and over and over again. Again, the Tegrity, downloading the Tegrity, reading their notes out loud, listening to tapes while driving or walking or working or exercising, dictating your notes, reading questions out loud. When you're going through and doing the NCLEX questions, read them out loud. Creating rhymes or mnemonics are also helpful. And I showed y'all the mnemonic page as well. I had this other hyperlink here in my PowerPoint, but it's not, doesn't seem to be working. I would encourage you to go to YouTube and type in the words rap, learning by listening or something like that, you will find tons of little rap songs that people have created to learn material, and that's particularly helpful for the auditory learner. Making up little rhymes and raps and so forth are very, very helpful. Here's a little example of a song on YouTube. I'm not sure you got that audio, but go on YouTube and listen to this one. This is pretty good. It's called Breathe, and it was created by some anesthesiologist. It's just an example of that sort of way of learning. Here's another example of a mnemonic Rome. This helps with interpreting blood gases, but it's just a little way to memorize which factor is respiratory versus metabolic. And so when you create these, and it just really does help with memorization of information. The next type of learner is the kinesthetic learner. This is the learner that prefers to do things to learn the material. And actually creating, getting very physically active in your learning, motions, doing little dances to learn the material helps these students. Exercising, working out, and brainstorming is a way of learning. Being active when you're learning, turning ideas into objects, building physical things, actually learning by doing. And so these students tend to excel in the clinical setting because they're kinesthetic learners, and so they do very well. So role plays and skits to learn the material is a technique. Playing games, creating questions, doing something with the material physically. I just wanted to touch a little bit on group learning and group studying. There are a few things that will lead to success if you're participating in a group studying effort. Key to success is, choosing a leader. If you're studying with a group, you need to have one person that's the leader, and everybody needs to recognize that person as a leader, and they need to be comfortable with leading the group. Every member of the group needs to be involved and contribute to the learning environment, because if you have a student that's in your group that's not contributing, oftentimes other members of the group tend to dislike that person, and then there's usually problems. So every person needs to be very, very involved and bring something to the group, not just come and absorb the information from everybody else. So members need to be organized, they need to bring their notes, they need to be prepared when they come to study. They need to have studied before they come with a group. The group study should be reinforcement, not the first time they look at the material. Members of the group need to keep their word and show up at the agreed upon time and date. They need to come prepared. They need to follow a set schedule to meet and study if you're going to be a part of a formal study group. And somebody there, preferably probably the leader, needs to keep everybody on task. Being aware that you spend 45 minutes studying and 5 minutes socializing, keeping, say we're going to get started now, we're going to study this material at 45 minutes after the hour, we'll take a break and we'll kind of catch up on social things, or we'll have a snack, or, structuring that learning session with breaks and with time to socialize is important. There's a special kind of synergy that occurs with studying in groups or studying even in pairs. It helps reinforce the material. It helps each learner to clarify the material with one another, and it deepens learning beyond, imagination, really. It's a really good thing if you can study with a group or study with another person. It gives you feedback on where you're at with the material. Do you know it? Are you or do you need to study a certain section more? Maybe it identifies, where your weak areas are. And it helps to motivate you to study. If you know you're going to meet with a group Tuesday afternoon, then you're going to take the time, if you are organized and keep your word and establish a schedule, you're going to review your material before your study group time. That way you can contribute, and the synergy that'll come about is really phenomenal. So it takes a special group of people. It takes the right mix of people to be successful, but study groups are very, very successful techniques for learning the material. Another point about study groups is it allows time for note-taking reinforcement. It allows you to look at someone else's notes during that time. And some people in the group may be more talented in certain areas than others, and so you can learn from other folks' strengths, and they can learn from your strengths. Say you're really good at the bedside and you're very good at listening, and you're talking about communication, then you can share techniques that you use that they can learn from, or experiences you've had and successes you've had that they can learn from, and then maybe they're very good at understanding fluid and electrolyte physiology, and they can explain that to you. So it can be a very, very good learning environment to participate in a group if you're in the right group with the right mix of folks. On this slide, I've got a number of statements, and I would encourage you to look at these statements and say, yes, that statement does apply to me, or sometimes it applies to me, or no, it does not apply to me. And so look at particularly these first 7 statements and decide if this applies to you or not. With each of these statements, we have a help for you. So I'm going to go to each one of these and let you look at them. I'm not going to read them to you, but you can stop your tape and read them yourself. So for the person that finds it hard to start studying, we've got check, change environments, have all equipment nearby while studying, establish rewards for yourself, create a checklist, keep a worry pad. And so I will have these files available where you can just print them off at your discretion for each one of these topics, and you can read through them and try to implement some of these practices to try to help you with your problem areas. Your next one, I can't stay focused when I study. So I'm just going to open all these up for you to see on the screen, but we should have these files available to you where you can actually print them by the time you review this recording. Break. We have break to help you remember information for a test. And you can see it's a little bit longer than some of the others. We have Conair to help you study from books. So these are techniques you can utilize to strengthen the areas that you're weak in. pats to help you not get distracted while you study. We have S2 top to stay focused when you study. Check to help you start studying. R3 high to help you study from your notes. So these are wonderful techniques. Worry to help you organize your information from books and notes. And then we have another studying from objectives, which this is a great technique to try to help you structure and organize your study and looking at your objectives. And I think we've already talked about this. Now, this material is more for the students that are maybe in courses that you're studying disease processes. You're already studying abnormal health issues, and so this is a technique for studying where you identify all the different factors or pieces of information surrounding a condition or abnormality, and you work through each one of these points in your studying, and you learn everything you need to know about a condition. And so we've got a help sheet called Problem Pieces, and I'm going to pull that up for you. This piece is quite lengthy, but this will help you recognize, categorize, and piece together all the important components of care by actively listening in class, reading, and note-taking. So you would look for each one of these pieces of information relative to the condition you're studying. And if you learned all these factors about a condition, then you should be able to do well on a test. Now, it's a lot of material, and it takes quite a bit of work to do this. But if you work through this, say you're studying TB, and you work through every one of these factors, and you learn this material, then you would most likely be able to do very, very well on any type of test question. I've got these listed here, and I'm not going to read them for you, but I will make sure you have these available, this sheet available to you as well. And so, searching for all this information and applying it to the condition you're studying, you're going to learn the material. I'll also try to make sure you have access to this little table. This covers all the points that were on that list, and you could do you a quick little bullet for each area and use this, cover it up, and use it for studying. My final suggestions are that you attend all test review if your courses offer the test review. Again, prioritize your time. Be flexible. Be sure and use all the resources that are at your fingertips, and don't get yourself in a situation where you must rely on your final test grade to pass. A lot of students, they're right there on the line, and they don't pass by a small number, but don't get yourself in a situation. Do well on every test. Your assignment after listening to this recording is to place your name and date on a piece of paper when you viewed this program, and list the new strategies that you've identified from viewing the program that you plan to implement and utilize before your next test. I would like for you to tell a classmate or family member about your plan. And that way you've got an accountability buddy. And then after your next test, list your grade on that same piece of paper and if the new strategies seem to help you. And you need to turn this page into your advisor within 1 week of your next test so that we can put it in your files. And this demonstrates that you went to the extra effort you needed to be successful in your course. My last words of encouragement, I think this picture kind of says it all. You've got to be passionate about whatever you're studying. It has to be something you wake up to and you're excited to do. Your passions tend to be where you spend most of your time. For me, my passions are my family, my faith, and my professional life. And I'm passionate about continuing to learn, continuing to be safe, and facilitating learning. Ask yourself, are you passionate about it? My next suggestion is that you need to be flexible. Things change. You have to be flexible and go with the flow. Be nimble, okay? And adjust. Make adjustments as you find that something's not working for you when you're studying. Try something else. Adjust. Use all available resources. And grow and learn from your mistakes, okay? And have an attitude of humility. I wish you well in your studies and the courses you're taking here at Calhoun. Thank you very much.